Ladies and gentlemen, we're here with the UFC 295 predictions, Prochazka versus Pereira. It's an amazing card and I'm going to be going through the whole card, starting with the first prelim, ending with the main event, giving my prediction and breakdown of every single fight on this pay-per-view card. And you guys let me know who you guys are picking in the comments, but let's get started. So the first fight is Denis Buzukja versus Jamal Emmers. In this one, I'm going to be taking Jamal Emmers to win. I think all round, he's a better mixed martial artist. I think he's more well-rounded. I think he can get it done across the distance. He's long. He's got a long frame as well. In Buzukja's last fight, he fought Sean Woodson, who's also a really long, awkwardly lanky guy. And he did give him problems, is something that I noticed. Obviously, he struggled in that fight. It was his debut, so maybe he could show up looking a lot better here. But I think Jamal Emmers, in his last fight against Jack Jenkins, I personally think he won. I thought that was a robbery decision, and I picked Jamal Emmers to win that too. So I was a bit annoyed by that decision. But he looked really good in that fight. He gave Jack Jenkins a lot of trouble with the grappling as well, even the striking with the length. His boxing was really clean. And Sean Woodson as well was catching Buzukja at the end of his punches with that long range. So I can definitely see Jamal Emmers doing something similar here and just kind of piecing him up from range with the boxing, taking him down if he needs to. But ultimately I see him winning on the feet, and I see it being a relatively entertaining fight where it's just a pretty clear 30-27. Maybe Buzukja takes around 29-28, but I do see Jamal Emmers getting this one done. But we move on to the next fight. Joshua Van versus Kevin Borjas. Another one I'm pretty confident on. I'm taking Joshua Van in this fight. I think he's actually a really promising prospect at flyweight. He's super young. He's like 22 or 23. In his debut, he fought Zhalgas Shumagulov, who, although his record doesn't suggest it, he's actually a really solid fighter. He's not with the UFC anymore, but Zhalgas has got, throughout his whole career, he's got a bunch of fights where, it could have gone the other way. A lot of people called robbery in a lot of Zhalgas's fights. So if the judges score them different, then honestly, he gets it. Like, his career goes very differently, and could be like a top 10 ranked fighter if a lot of those decisions had gone his way. And Joshua Van pretty cleanly outstruck and beat up Zhalgas for 2 of the 3 rounds. He won a clear 29-28 in my eyes. His boxing is crisp. He's from Burma, I'm pretty sure, or Myanmar. And he's the only fighter coming out of that country. So crazy stuff for him. That's pretty exciting, and I do think he can get this one done against Kevin Borjas, who his only fight that we've really seen notably is on the Contender Series, and he was getting held down and dominated in the grappling. But the only reason why he won 2 of those 3 rounds was because right at the end of the round he ended up getting up and just landing some punches and beating up this old, not that impressive opponent. So I didn't like what I saw from him in that Contender Series fight, and I do believe comfortably that Joshua Van can get this one done. But we move on to the next fight. It's John Castenada versus Kang. I'll be taking John Castenada in this fight. I liked his performance for the most part against Muin Gafurov. I think he looked solid in most of that fight, but Muin Gafurov just had this immense pressure style, which ended up just kind of flustering him and getting enough done on the scorecards. Kang, I don't see that same style here. I think he's a guy that, if you look at his fight with Christian Quinones, he got rocked early and then he ended up dropping Quinones back because he ran in too much. I don't see Castenada doing that. I think his boxing technique is pretty solid. I see him winning on the feet across the decision, or across the distance to a decision win. Yeah, Kang, I just wasn't all that impressed with him, to be honest. Across his fights, he's lost a few, he's won a few, but I just haven't seen anything crazy from him. Not like Castenada's like a future top 10 contender in my eyes, but I still think he's a solid enough fighter to win this one here against Kang. We move on. Mark Madsen versus Jared Gordon. I'm taking Jared Gordon in this one. I don't rate Mark Madsen in any way whatsoever. I think his grappling's extremely overrated just because he's got some Olympic credentials or some shit. But I do see Jared Gordon cleanly winning this fight. Obviously, I don't see him getting finished because Jared Gordon has pillow hands and he doesn't finish people. But Mark Madsen's pretty terrible. He's lost most of his fights. His recent win, I think he beat Vince Pichel. That's not an impressive performance to have. So yeah, I see Jared Gordon, who in my opinion got robbed against Paddy Pimblett, in a lot of people's opinion, got robbed against Paddy Pimblett. So I do see him like, and he looked solid against Jared Gordon as well until he got headbutted, and then that fight was a no contest. So I think Jared Gordon's solid. I think his technique is actually pretty good. The finishing potential is probably not going to be there, but I do see him outpointing Mark Madsen for the 15 minutes. We move on up the card. Nazim Sadykhov versus Viacheslav Borshchev. I'm taking Nazim Sadykhov in this fight. This is one that I've thought about. This is one that I'm not all that confident in. It's a pretty close fight in my eyes because the takedown defense and the grappling improvements of Viacheslav Borshchev are something that remain to be kind of seen. We haven't seen the extent of his grappling yet. We don't know how good he is because in the past he has been taken down and dominated before. He hasn't looked the best in the defensive grappling, but I think he definitely has been making improvements. But ultimately, I'm going to go with Nazim Sadykhov. I think he looked really good against Terence McKinney in the second round, I guess you could say. He's been solid. He's working with like Merab and Aljo. So ultimately, this is not the most confident pick. I do think he's striking solid. He had a fun fight with Evan Elder where he looked pretty good. But yeah, I'm not all that confident in this pick, if I'm being honest. This is definitely one of my less confident picks on the card, because if Borshchev can stuff the takedowns, he looked really good on the feet against Mahashate. But Mahashate is like a guy, he's young, 23, only like a very average striking as well, to be honest. So I'm going to go with Sadykhov, really close fight. I think he can get a takedown, and I think he can get a submission or just control to a decision win. I think he's definitely going to be making improvements as well, working with that Serra Longo team. We move on. Up the card, Mateusz Rabecki versus Roosevelt Roberts. This one just got added. It was a replacement because Rabecki was going to be fighting Narula Aliev, which was going to be a great fight, which I was looking forward to a lot. But unfortunately, that got cancelled, and now we've got a far less exciting replacement in Roosevelt Roberts. I don't see him winning this fight. I see him getting absolutely smoked, to be honest, by Mateusz Rabecki. Rabecki is a guy that I see having the potential to be ranked in the future, to be honest. I see Rabecki as a real problem and a guy that could take a push at like the top 10. Coming out of Poland, he's a great fighter. He's got really short arms, which I don't like against the longer fighter in Roosevelt Roberts, but Roberts has been KO'd before by like Ignacio Bahamondes and stuff. Rabecki's got mad power. He's got good grappling as well. In his last fight against Loic Rajdabov, he was an underdog, I'm pretty sure. It was like a close favourite maybe. And he went out there and just dominated Rajdabov. He cooked his legs as well. I think the leg kick's going to be big against a guy in Roberts who is not built to the best. He's not like the most like physical specimen, you would say. So I'm taking Rabecki with high confidence. I think he's going to dominate and KO Roosevelt Roberts in the pocket, coming in with a big hook. We move on up the card to Tabatha Ricci versus Lupita Godinez. This is one I've been thinking about a lot. I'm going to take Lupita Godinez, though. I think she's a bit more physically dominant than Tabatha Ricci, and I think she can use that in the grappling to either defend Tabatha Ricci's takedown attempts and keep it on the feet, where I think she wins, or she could get her own takedowns and hold down Tabatha Ricci. In the last fight against Elise Reed, I know it's Elise Reed, but she looked great. She looked dominant, strong. She was throwing slams. Power as well. She dropped Elise Reed halfway across the cage. Like, you don't see power and just physical like bullying like that in the women's divisions very often. So I definitely like her in this fight. Ricci's kind of got like pure jiu-jitsu. In a last fight against Jillian Robertson, who really did not much in that fight, I'm not going to be all that impressed with that one. But Ricci could definitely get it done if Godinez is just not all that, and that performance against Reed was like a one-off, or maybe Elise Reed is just the worst fighter ever. But she just smoked Elise Reed, 10-8 in the first, finished her in the second. So I think her physical dominance is going to be too much for Tabatha Ricci, and I think she's going to get it done. Ricci's got a nice ass though, so wouldn't mind if she won. But we move on to the prelim headliner, Steve Erceg versus Alessandro Costa. This is another close one, another replacement fight, which I've been going back and forth on. Ultimately, I'm going to go with Steve Erceg. I was contemplating picking Alessandro Costa as an underdog because I think his power and pressure style with heavy leg kicks, I think, is something that could get it done for him. But ultimately, Steve Erceg, I think in his last fight against David Dvorak, he was dominant in the, or not dominant, but he was clean on the outside. His distance striking looked great. He even dropped Dvorak a couple times, which was really impressive. So I see him getting this one done, to be honest. I do think that he's going to outpoint Alessandro Costa, who did ultimately get dropped and finished by Emilio Albazi. So I just can't trust that that much, to be honest. He looked great in his last fight against Jimmy Flick, but Jimmy Flick's not all that. And he dominated him. I do think the leg kicks are going to be big here for Costa, but I think Erceg ultimately is just better. He's more well-rounded. I think he could probably mix in some takedowns as well. But if Costa wins, it definitely wouldn't surprise me. This is a great fight, though. But we move up the card to the main card. And it's Diego Lopes versus Pat Sabatini. I'm going to go with Diego Lopes in this fight. I'm pretty high on him. I think he's a great prospect to watch in the featherweight division. I think he's someone that I'm excited to see more of in the future. And I think he's going to absolutely dominate Pat Sabatini and finish him. Look, everyone's hyping up Pat Sabatini as this sick grappler or something. Like, he subbed like Lucas Almeida in his last fight. Like, that is, like, we're not talking about that as that much of an impressive performance. Like, Almeida's not that good. Pat Sabatini's got little T-Rex arms. And Diego Lopes is a huge featherweight. I think he's going to absolutely mog him when they face off. I think he's going to be way bigger than him. And I think that's going to help him defend takedowns if he needs, or if he decides to just go to the ground. I think he's going to be so physically strong that he can just have his way with Pat Sabatini in the grappling department. So I'm super excited for this fight. I think Lopes as well in the stand-up. In his fight with Movsar Evloev, he looked phenomenal. He gave him his toughest fight of his career, and he almost subbed Movsar a couple times. So Pat Sabatini, who I only see his path to victory in any real fight against anyone as going for the takedowns. He doesn't really hurt people on the feet, to be honest. Doesn't hurt many people on the feet. So I don't see him having success on the feet. I think Lopes is a powerful dude that can put him away if they do stay standing. And I think he's going to be forced to wrestle, which is going to just put him into a bad spot, because Lopes on his back is one of the most dangerous guys in the division, even in the sport, from the guard. So I don't think Pat Sabatini is going to have any success here, to be honest. I think this is going to be a thorough domination for Diego Lopes. And he's an underdog as well, which I find absolutely crazy. But we move up the card to Benoit St. Denis versus Matt Frevola. This is one that I've been looking forward to a lot. This is one of my favourite fights of the year. Definitely one of my favourite fights of the card. And this is like my sort of like unranked main event. Like, this is the non-main event main event. Out of those first, like, this is the third best fight on the card by far, in my opinion. Obviously, the main and co-main, phenomenal, but this is a highly anticipated matchup, and it's going to be an absolute barn burner, possibly one of the best fights of the year. I'm predicting it to take home fight of the night as well, to be honest. In this matchup, though, I'm going to be taking Benoit St. Denis. I'm really high on him as well. I think he's an amazing prospect, and I think he can do really well in the future at the top of the lightweight division. I think he can make a run at the belt at some point. He's 27 years old, really young. His chin is granite. People were talking about Drew Dober's chin when Frevola KO'd him, and they're like, oh, how'd you just KO Dober? He's got the best chin ever. Dober's a guy getting a bit older. He's been dropped a couple times in his career. But Benoit St. Denis is a guy who, he got pieced up by Zaleski dos Santos up a weight class on short notice. And he still didn't even really get dropped. He got wobbled a few times, but that's a welterweight on short notice in your debut. Since then, he's just been absolutely murdering people. He's just been on a killing spree, dominating the best, like, some of the best fighters outside the top 15 in the lightweight division. Smoked Bonfim and then smoked Thiago Moises inside 2 rounds, who's a guy that took Makhachev 4 rounds, honestly. So I see Benoit as a major problem. The one issue I have here, the one like kind of worry that I have, is he's going to come in swinging to the pocket with his hands down and get caught, because it is undeniable that Frevola has one-shot KO power. We've seen it time and time again. He KO'd Dober, he KO'd Azaita. Benoit, another issue that I kind of have with him is how active he's been. Although it's been amazing, we keep seeing him back in there. He fought in July against Bonfim, he fought in September against Moises, and he's fighting in November. So he's fighting 3 times in the space of like 6 months. That is something I'm a bit concerned about in case he's picked up injuries and stuff. He throws kicks a lot, so maybe he's got some damage to his shins, his feet and stuff. But ultimately, assuming no injuries are taking into this fight, I'm going to go with Benoit St. Denis. I think his physical pressure, his grappling is going to be enough to get it done as well. And I think even in the stand-up, I think he could probably beat Frevola, but ultimately I think he mixes in the grappling. If you look at the Arman Sayukian fight with Matt Frevola, he got taken down and held there in 30-27 pretty comfortably. So I see Benoit taking him down. He's looked great in his last fights. He took down and dominated Thiago Moises in the grappling. Matt Frevola, I know he's got some wrestling jiu-jitsu background, but ultimately I think he's really turned into a striker. And I think when he's put on his back, he's going to get tired quickly. I think he's going to get held down. I think Benoit St. Denis is going to give him a lot of problems. So, taking Benoit in this matchup, but absolutely pumped for it. I think he's going to get a second round. I'll go second round TKO with ground and pound. Similar to the Moises fight. I think he takes him down. They scrap a little bit in the first round. I think he probably gets rocked. And at the end of the round, his corner's like yelling at him to not stop brawling. And then I think he goes back to the grappling in the second. And I think he's going to take down Frevola and threaten subs and then just TKO him towards the end of the round. So, we move on. Mackenzie Dern versus Jessica Andrade. I'm comfortable in this pick. I'm taking Mackenzie Dern. In her last fight against Angela Hill, who I know is not the level of Jessica Andrade most likely, she looked amazing and she just dominated her the whole time. She's got this newfound sort of aggression, way better cardio, actually throws ground and pound now instead of just trying to go for submissions as like a pure jiu-jitsu person. She's really started to put that MMA aspect into her grappling, and I think that's going to help her get this one done against Jessica Andrade, who, let's be honest, she's a bit of an iffy fighter. Like, she dominated Lauren Murphy at the start of the year, who's very average. But then since then, she got dominated and taken down by Erin Blanchfield. She got KO'd stiff by, or not stiff, but she got flash KO'd by Yan Jianan. And then she got dominated and subbed by Tatiana Suarez. So Mackenzie Dern, so that Erin Blanchfield and Suarez fight, that kind of tells me all I need to know. So Andrade's grappling is not where it needs to be to defend someone like Dern. I see her getting taken down badly, and I see her just getting beaten up and submitted inside 2 rounds. I'm going Mackenzie Dern by a second round submission. I'm gonna go with I'll go with maybe an armbar, or maybe she gets like a TKO. I'll go rear naked choke actually, or she just gets a TKO ground and pound. But we move on to the co-main event, Sergey Pavlovich versus Tom Aspinall. He's a great fighter. I'd love to fight him for the interim title. I'm going to go with Sergey Pavlovich. I think he can catch Tom Aspinall and put him away. Look, this is a dangerous fight for Sergey. Tom Aspinall is the most well-rounded heavyweight, I think, on the roster apart from John Jones. I think he's one of the quickest heavyweights, maybe apart from Cyril Gane. And I think he's probably got the best grappling at heavyweight apart from maybe Gelton Almeida. So I think... he's just elite everywhere, to be honest, is Tom Aspinall. So this is definitely a worrying fight. Style-wise, I do believe that, if you look at this without the power for Pavlovich, then Aspinall, I think, wins. He's just better everywhere, I think, except for probably the striking, the boxing technique. But that power for Sergey Pavlovich is just the difference maker in any of his fights. He's got one-shot power, and he's got a massive reach advantage over everyone. He's got a 6-inch reach advantage, and I think he's going to put that to good use, and I think he's going to be pumping that jab in the face of Tom Aspinall, wobbling him around the octagon. I've rewatched a bunch of Tom Aspinall's fights, especially even against Marcin Tybura in his most recent fight, where he looked great, and he did get a finish in a minute and a half. But even in that fight, he had moments where he came in with his chin up, and he did get cracked by Tybura, who's not a power puncher. So you're not going to find too many troubles there with Marcin Tybura on the feet. But I think all his other fights, he feels confident to bounce around. He's never kind of had to fear the KO power. But in this one, I think he's going to be really defensively minded. And I don't think that's going to allow him to move as freely as he does. Tom Aspinall is normally moving about. He's got his chin up in the air. He's doing this, jumping in and out. Against Sergey Pavlovich, I think his freedom on the feet is going to be restricted, and I don't think he's going to be as confident just throwing anything he wants or running in with that 1-2. I think he's really going to be hesitant to engaging on the feet, and sometimes when you're hesitant engaging on the feet, that ends up being the worst outcome for you, and that ends up making you get cracked easier. So I see that happening here. I see Tom Aspinall being a bit more ploddy, being a bit more slow, trying to, focus on the defense when they are on the feet. And as much as he said it, I just see him shooting, and I see him getting desperate for takedowns, and I don't see them working, to be honest, because Sergey Pavlovich is an absolute fridge. He's a hard man to grab a hold of. He's just bulky. He's like a rectangle. His body shape's a rectangle. He's not that long, lanky guy like Volkov that Aspinall took down easily. Or he's not like a slow, ploddy guy like Spivak that Aspinall's able to catch on the feet. Or Tybura. I just see Sergey's build and his power and his striking as just something that Aspinall's never dealt with, and something that he's not going to be able to deal with as well. I think if Aspinall's going to be just desperate to shoot, and I think Pavlovich, that's going to make it easier to see. When he's not focusing on the striking, and if Aspinall, I think, if he's only going in there just to shoot takedowns, I don't think he's going to be as quick with it. I don't think he's going to be as seamless as he is against a guy like Volkov when he had that beautiful duck under. I think against Pavlovich, I think he's going to throw. I can see Sergey Pavlovich throwing a hook, maybe overextending himself. And in a scenario where Aspinall would normally shoot in quickly for a takedown, I think he might be a bit scared and he might quickly back off. I think anytime Sergey throws, I think Aspinall is going to really back off and get scared out of the striking exchanges. So I do see Sergey Pavlovich dominating Aspinall on the field. Well, not dominating, but I see him just kind of scaring him and bullying him with the range. I see him walking him forward, pumping that jab in his face. Anytime Aspinall blitzes in, I think he catches him with a big hook and wobbles him, maybe puts him down a couple times. And I do see if Sergey shoots, I know the over-in fight was not appealing, but that's not like a blast double. That was like this weird trip. Not something that we see Aspinall use a whole lot, and I do think that was some debut nerves, that was some short notice kind of factor there for Pavlovich. And I think this time against Tom Aspinall, he's going to be a lot better. He's going to be across it. And I don't see him getting taken down. I see his build being enough. I see him kind of shoving back Tom Aspinall. Against Curtis Blades even, who shot a decent takedown, got in on the legs, and you would have thought he'd be able to finish it. Pavlovich got his hips back really quickly, and he's just a solid guy. So I don't see Aspinall getting him. I don't see him having too much success in the grappling. And on the striking, I think he's going to be shitting himself, and I don't think it's going to bode well for him. So I'm taking Sergey Pavlovich by a first-round TKO to become the new interim champion. But we move up the card to the main event. It's Alex Pereira versus Jiri Prochazka. This one's a banger. This one is the one that we've all been looking forward to. One of the most anticipated fights of the year. And I'm taking Alex Pereira to KO Jiri Prochazka inside 3 rounds, I'll say, is my time frame. Jiri's too wild in my opinion. Look, I know he's got an awkward style, I know he's got power, and I know Pereira has been caught before, but he's been caught by Adesanya, who's a clean counter striker, who's got lethal precision. Jiri, I just don't see him landing that kind of shot here. And he's not that much of a counter striker either. Jiri's a guy that comes forward on the front foot, and I think Alex Pereira is going to have a nice time countering him when Jiri comes in with his awkward style on the front foot. I just don't see Pereira struggling to defend that kind of striking. That's what I see here. I think, honestly, the worst style for Pereira is a guy that can just counter strike him and defend all his shots, not leave himself open, because Pereira KOs a lot of people when they leave themselves open, like Strickland walked into that punch. I think if you make Strickland come to you, so if you make Pereira come to you, I think he leaves himself a bit more open. We saw that against Izzy, he got countered a couple times. Even Blachowicz was cracking him with a few shots, but I don't see Jiri Prochazka as that same defensive counter striker. I don't see him having success in the grappling either. I think this stays on the feet personally for the whole time. And ultimately, I just see Pereira catching him. You know, I see him chopping up his legs. Obviously, Glover's fought Jiri in the past. I think that's going to help here tremendously. I think they're going to be across that. They're going to know what they're doing. They're going to figure out. Even Glover has success against Jiri. Guys catch Jiri. He leaves himself open. His hands are down by his waist. And I just don't see him being able to compete technically with Pereira on the feet. Pereira's going to keep it out of the brawling scenario. He's not going to get baited into a war where he leaves himself open for counter-strikes. Again, I don't think he's going to counter-strike him too effectively, to be honest. So yeah, that's what I think about this fight ultimately. I just see Pereira staying at range. I think he's got a longer reach, I'd imagine. I think him chopping up the legs badly, pumping a jab in Jiri's face, attacking him with that left hook. Especially with that long layoff for Prochazka, I think he's going to be a little bit ring rusted, and I think early he's not going to be as confident just going for it straight away with that wild style. So yeah, I'm taking Alex Pereira, I'm taking him by KO, and I'm taking him to become a double champion and potentially one of the greatest combat sports athletes of all time. That's my predictions for the card, guys. Let me know who you guys are picking in the comments. One more time, I'll run through them. I'm picking Emmers, I'm picking Joshua Van, I'm picking Castenada, picking Gordon, picking Sadykhov, picking Rabecki, picking Godinez, picking Erceg, Lopez, Benoit, Dern, Pavlovich, and Alex Pereira. Those are my picks, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. Go check out my recent PowerPoint video, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and I'll see you in the next one.